All right. We are back, and it is our well, it's not our normal Monday. It is Monday. I was going to say it's our normal Monday, but it's not a game week, and it won't be a game week for a little while. So we're going to kind of take a different strategy here the next few days, and we're going to talk about a few different topics, obviously all Notre Dame related. And we're going to have some fun with this week because there's some topics that Brian and I have wanted to get to, but we wanted to make sure that we stayed kind of, normal and everybody would understand and be expected and anticipate, what our shows were going to be. But the season is over, the regular season. There's a bow on the regular season for Notre Dame. All that is left is to sit back and see what happens with everybody else. So we're going to talk about today Notre Dame and kind of where they stand right now, and not necessarily where they stand against, are they going to make the college football playoff and all that? That's not this show. This show is about where Notre Dame stands right now, offensively, defensively. Are they one of the top 4 teams in the country this year, or are they one of the top 4 teams in the country really any year? Like that, that kind of a conversation. And so we're gonna break it down offensively, defensively. We're gonna talk about how this team has improved, where they stand now. Do they match up with the top teams in the country? And I will also say, because I'm looking at the chat, a lot of discussion about Lincoln Riley, et cetera, going to USC. We did a show on that yesterday. So that is not what this show is about. So we're probably not going to bring up that kind of stuff today. So check out our show, though, because it was about an hour long, and that's all it was. So
right.
You can get all your fill from that show if you would like. But we're going to talk Notre Dame now.
Yeah, and it is kind of with the thought of if Notre Dame makes the playoff, not necessarily should it. We'll have that conversation later. We'll make our case for Notre Dame being a playoff team later. This is sort of a prequel to that a little bit, but also just kind of looking at this team and really trying to take a bird's eye view of really what this team has become. And that's, to me, that's the thing that's going to make this whole debate, Vince, really interesting, is because, look, I've kind of felt this for a couple weeks, and it's really been cemented the way they've played the last 2 weeks. Again, did they play phenomenal football the last 2 weeks? Perfect football? No. Have they been really, really good? Yeah.
But has anybody played perfect football over the last few weeks? I mean, I think that's part of the conversation.
Georgia's about it. I mean, and when we be perfect, we're talking hyperbolic, just really thriving. But, the thing is, we're critiquing a Notre Dame team that in the last 2 games beat a pair of Power 5 teams 100-14.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
100 points in 2 games.
When you're critiquing a 45-14 victory over Stanford, which is, again, that's our job. That's what we do, right? That says a lot about where you are as a football program and where you are in this team. And look, we'll get into the offseason about that they should have maybe done this sooner and what coulda, shoulda, woulda, whatever. We'll talk more about that when we get to the playoff conversation. But the fact is right now, I don't know outside of Georgia if you have a hotter team in the country than Notre Dame. And there's a lot of stats to back it up. You can look at how they've just dominated opponents in the last month.
Yep.
The fact is, there was somebody brought up a stat last night, and it caused me to look even further into it. Somebody put a post on the board at the Irish Breakdown message board, which you can sign up for there down below at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And the point that was made was Notre Dame is a top 10 team nationally when it comes to stats against Power 5 opponents only. And so they're in the top 10 in scoring and the top 10 in scoring defense when you look at just games against Power 5 opponents.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame this season is scoring 38.2 points per game. So of any team in the country that's played at least 2 games against a Power 5 team, right? Notre Dame is 4th nationally in scoring at 38.2 points per game. and they're sixth in scoring defense at 17.8 points per game. There's only one other team that ranks in the top 10 in both against Power 5 opponents, and it's not going to shock you who that other team is. It's Georgia.
Georgia, yeah.
So it's Notre Dame and Georgia. That's it. And the reason I like that stat is because it takes out some of the garbage that we see and we hear about from other teams. You know, it takes away the 59-3 beatdown that Alabama put on New Mexico State and their victory over Mercer, you know, that really, really convincing Alabama victory of 48-14 over a FCS team that's not even good at the FCS level. So it really puts it into context just how good this team is playing, how well this team is playing, and what this team is capable of. And we've seen it the last month. You know, when to me, to be a great playoff team, to be a team that's got a chance to compete for a championship, and this is what separates this team, you have to be really good on both sides of the ball. Vince, you and I have been saying for years at different places, we've been saying it since we launched this channel, that Notre Dame has played championship defense before. In 2018, to a degree last year, but not quite as much as 2018. I think 2017, by the end of the year, that defense was playing pretty good. I think the numbers against Stanford and Miami are very, very misleading because they had, 3 pick sixes in those 2 games and short fields because of turnovers and all that other kind of stuff. 2012, they played championship defense. What Notre Dame has never had, in 2015, they had an offense that I thought could score on anybody, but they didn't have a championship defense. They've never really put them all together. We still don't know if this offensive line can go toe-to-toe with a great defense. We're not going to learn that till the postseason. But I'm as confident in the system, the quarterback, the skill players on offense as I've been in a long time.
Yeah.
And to me, that number one, and we'll talk about the defense too, but that number one, Vince, is the thing that really has me believing that this Notre Dame team has a chance to, if they can get into the postseason and be a playoff team, that makes them very, very dangerous. And then you combine that with the fact of, let's be honest, it's not going to be as good of a field of 4 as it's been. This is probably the weakest field of 4.
Yeah.
I would argue since maybe 2016, 2014. You know, 2016, you had an Ohio State team that didn't win the Big Ten, wasn't a real good Ohio State team. You had, I believe that was the year that Washington made it. You know, they were a decent team, but not great. You know, I'm trying to think of some other years. I mean, this is a pretty weak field, in my opinion.
Well, there's flawed teams. I think that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, you can look at, okay, Ohio State's pretty darn good on offense. They're out anyway. You know, Michigan has a pretty darn good defense.
But why is Ohio State out? That's the point.
Right? For sure.
Because they're a very flawed team.
Because they're a flawed team. You can look at all the teams, including Georgia for that matter, okay? There's flaws on all these teams. There's no juggernaut team. Now, Georgia is as close as there is, okay? I am willing to accept that, okay? But does their offense really scare anybody? I don't think that it does. Their defense is really, really good. It makes their offense look better, but their offense doesn't really scare anybody. And then you just go down the line, right? I think anybody in this chat would love a rematch against Cincinnati. They're clearly going to make it if they beat Houston.
Oh, heck yes.
In the AAC championship, right? So, okay. So there's flaws, obviously, for Cincinnati and Oklahoma State. I mean, are we really – look, I'm worried about Oklahoma State jumping Notre Dame because of their resume and all that. But if Notre Dame played against Oklahoma State, am I worried about them? I'm not.
No.
So – that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about these teams that are slotted in the Final Four. They all have major flaws, like flaws that you can take advantage of and win a game against, okay? Especially if you're Notre Dame, who is playing the most balanced football that they've played in a long time, okay? And that's the point we're trying to make is that, look, Notre Dame can score, right? If the offense, the way that they've been going about it, they can score. And the defense, I love everything that they're doing. They can prevent you from scoring. So they're balanced. And I like the matchups that Notre Dame would have against possible opponents in the college football playoff if they happen to make it.
When I look at this team, Vince, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about, are you balanced?
Yeah.
And the reason that matters is because you have to be able to be in a situation where you are able to and this is the critique we've had of Notre Dame in the past. Can you be successful if the other team can stop what you do best? And that's the problem
Right.
that Notre Dame has had. So if teams can
Yes.
shut down their run game, they haven't had the quarterback play or the system
And we've
or
talked
the
about that
skill
ad
players.
nauseum, right?
There's been something missing, right?
Just load the box and,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Right. And then you got to say, okay, defensively, okay, if you could run on them, they were in trouble. Or if you could throw on them, they were in trouble. I still feel like a good passing team could give Notre Dame some problems, which is why I said I didn't necessarily love the matchup against Oklahoma. I don't love the matchup against Ohio State. Well, here's the thing. If you look at the potential playoff teams, that if Notre Dame gets into the playoff, none of them throw the ball in a way that scares me.
Right.
So it's really setting up well for Notre Dame, which, every time I say that, I get even more and more angry about October 2nd.
Oh,
But,
yeah. No question.
it is what it is because it really is shaping up well for Notre Dame because Notre Dame and Georgia to me, well, yeah, no, I'll say this. Notre Dame and Georgia to me have proven to be the two most balanced teams in the last month. Now, people say, what about Michigan? Okay. It's a fair response, but my issue with Michigan is they had a great performance against Ohio State, but they were also a team that in this month blew a 16-point lead to Michigan State because they have their own set of flaws, right?
Sure.
And the fact is Michigan is a team that you can run on them if you're willing to do it. I mean, the teams have had success. Rutgers ran for 196 on Michigan in a game where they only beat Rutgers by 7. Michigan State ran on Michigan. Maryland ran on Michigan. Now, teams have not been able to run and throw on Michigan because Rutgers doesn't have the kind of pass game to scare Michigan. Maryland doesn't have that. Penn State doesn't have that. Michigan State doesn't really have that. Michigan State's got a nice pass game, but they've shown in big games.
Yeah.
They don't throw it as well in big games as they do
Yeah.
against some of the weaker teams in the schedule.
Yeah, they want to be able to run the ball, and they've got a very good offensive line. There's no question about it. They can control the game with their run game. But if you're talking about matchups against Notre Dame, I'll take Notre Dame's front seven against Michigan's run game, and you're going to force them to have to throw the ball. And one of the things I was most impressed with down the stretch for Notre Dame has been their secondary, has been their corner play. And if they're in the college football playoff, I mean, again, there's no guarantee, but I've got to think that there's going to be an All-American safety that's probably going to play in that game.
Right.
And so I feel pretty darn good against Michigan's pass game too. So, again, it's about matchups, right? What is Michigan really good at offensively? They're pretty darn good at running the football.
Right.
Notre Dame's pretty good at stopping the run too. So,
and then you get into, okay, well, Ohio State, against Ohio State, they hit some big pass plays. Again, Ohio State ranks 96 in the country in pass defense.
That's been their fatal flaw the whole season.
And Michigan State ranks 130th out of 130.
Right.
And so you look at it, and they're the two big games they played against teams that don't have great pass defenses. Ohio State's passer, their passer rating they rank 40th in pass efficiency rating. Notre Dame ranks 17th. Notre Dame has allowed 9 passing touchdowns. They've picked off 15 passes. Ohio State's allowed 18 touchdown passes and picked off 12. There's a big difference between Notre Dame's pass game and Ohio State's pass game. And Michigan State's pass efficiency defense isn't as bad as their yards allowed, but it's 85th. It's still pretty bad. So in the two huge games that Michigan had this year, they played against defenses that all honestly were one-dimensional. Now, the one game where the one, I would say, quote unquote, big game that Michigan had where it was more competitive and they won was Penn State. And they beat that. That was a good win. Yes, Penn State 7-5, but Penn State matches up real well against Michigan.
They did.
And the reason why is because Penn State defensively is pretty balanced in both run and pass defense. It's not a great defense, but it's a good look. They held Ohio State to 33 points. That's one of the best performances the team has had against Ohio State's offense all year.
Sure.
Other than the two big losses that they had, which was Oregon and Michigan. And Michigan scored 21 points and needed to score late to win that game. they're going to look a lot more like that version of the Michigan offense against Notre Dame, in my opinion, than they do the others. So what's the difference? Notre Dame has a much better offense than Penn State.
Oh, yeah.
The question would be, okay, but they've got great defensive line. Well, if you watch that defensive line, they're very good pass rushers. They're not as good. They're good against the run, but they're not great against the run. And their second level is not quite as good, in my opinion. So I feel like the strength of what we've seen from the Notre Dame offensive line has been pass blocking. Now, will they be able to do that against Ohio State? I mean, against Michigan? I hope we find out.
Hey, preview of things to come. If they have to play Michigan, matchups to watch, it's going to be their ends versus Notre Dame's tackles. Okay, that's that's going to be a really important piece to how that game turns out.
Right.
I mean, look, we're not saying that Notre Dame's just going to dominate whoever they play.
No,
that's not. Please don't take this show as that.
They remind me a lot of the 2017 Alabama team. That wasn't a sexy team all year. You know, they kind of got in at the end. They weren't the SEC champ. You look at how they played throughout the year. They just weren't a sexy team, but they just matched up. And again, how they finished is not like Notre Dame's. Remember, Alabama lost their last game of the year, but they got into the postseason that year, and they kind of caught a lucky draw. They got Clemson in the first round. Clemson that year was not a great team. That was the Kelly Bryant-led Clemson team that didn't have a great offense. You know, it wasn't a good matchup for them against them. And then, of course, Georgia wins. You know, Georgia beats Oklahoma in 2017. Right. I'll take this to my grave. If Oklahoma beats Georgia in that game, they smoke Alabama. They'd have scored 40 on that Alabama team. Right. Alabama then got lucky, and not lucky. I don't say luck. You make your luck, right? I'm saying fortunate in that they got the ideal matchup in the title game against a team that's just like them. Kirby's just like Alabama. He wants to be Alabama part 2, right? And I don't mean that like they run the same. I'm just mean like the philosophy that he cut his teeth under Nick Saban is what he wants to be. You know, we're going to play good defense. We're going to run the ball. He's trying to be Alabama from 6-7 years ago, right? Well, that was perfect for Alabama because they matched up really well with it, and they were able to go out and make plays. You know, but that Clemson team in 2017, they only averaged 33 points a game. That was not an explosive Clemson team. I mean, you know, you're looking throughout the year, they scored 14 points on Auburn. They scored 28 on Wake Forest. They scored 24 in the loss to Syracuse. They scored 24 in a win over Georgia Tech. That was not a dynamic Clemson offense. And again, it was just one of those years, and it's going to happen every 3 or 4 years where it's just a lot of the top schools are a lot of them are going through a little bit of a rebuild, a true rebuild of what a great team should be, which is not a making excuses for being young, but you're really good. You're just not quite as elite as you were the year before when you won the title. And that's how this Notre Dame situation sets up for me, is if they can somehow back into the playoff and catch some breaks this weekend. I love the matchup because, again, when I look at this Notre Dame football team, what do you need what we've always talked about? You've got to be able to score.
Correct.
And I'm more confident in this team being able to score than I was a month ago. If we're talking about the Notre Dame team we saw in October, please don't make the playoff. Please don't make the playoff. Please don't make the playoff.
That was me at nighttime.
That was absolutely Vince.
At my bedside.
We had these conversations.
That is not something that I wanted. I wanted Notre Dame to go to a New Year's Six, get a win, so everybody's all happy and back pats on the way into the offseason. Like that was best case scenario as far as I was concerned, at that point during the season. And that's just not the case anymore. And that's honestly, it's kind of how I felt with Notre Dame going into the playoff the last 2 times they've been there. Okay, I know our defense is going to be fine. They're gonna force some things. They're gonna do some things. It's the offense that scares me. I can't realistically predict that Notre Dame is going to score enough points to win a playoff game, and that has come to fruition, right? And we talked about the fact, the last time Notre Dame was in, they played Clemson. The Clemson game that they played in the playoff, right?
2018, yep.
Yeah, that one felt closer than it probably was, and we can talk about all the different things that could have gone Notre Dame's way if Love doesn't get hurt, all of those different things.
Ian throws the post. They correctly call the out-of-bounds fumble recovery by Chase, all that, yes.
All of that, absolutely. I just don't. I still didn't feel like that offense was ready to put the team on their shoulders and go score the football. Right. I have that feeling now. I feel like this offense can go score points against anybody. Okay. I'm not, and again, I'm not saying they're going to score 40. Okay. I'm not saying they're going to score 35, but I'm saying they can score. They don't need to score 35 with Notre Dame's defense. And I think that's the key that I'm making. Notre Dame's offense can be a complementary piece that can go score the football with this defense. That's the difference for me based on the last two college football playoff appearances.
Right. And so let's get into some specifics, right? Because you and I, we talk big picture stuff, but we also like to get into specifics, okay? And so I want to dive into the weeds of this offense, of why I think this offense is different. Number one, obviously the scheme is different, okay? Obviously the scheme is different. We're seeing Notre Dame in the last month has done a lot more. And I would argue that their points per game averages are a little misleading, because in Virginia, they could have scored over 40 if they wanted to. And they should have. And that was something we had an issue with. But they've really, really in the last month, to me, shown that they're able to be a more explosive offense. And that's the biggest difference for me. When you look at some of the offenses that Notre Dame had, you know, you look at last year's offense, you look at the 2018 offense, those teams just, to me, weren't the same type of dynamic big play offense. Now, last year, Notre Dame's numbers on offense going into the playoff were very similar to the ones that we're seeing now. So if you look at like their last four games of the regular season, starting with Clemson, they were at 6.6 yards per play, 7.2, 6.9, 7.4. That was going into the postseason. In 2018, in their last four games, it was 6.3, 6.6, 6.3, 6.8. This year's team, if you look at their total offense in the last four games, it's 7-7, 7-1, 6-9, 8-7. Similar, but I mean, you're talking last five games, 7-7, 7-1, 6-9, 8-7, 7-2. That's Notre Dame's last five games going into the playoff. In the last five games going into last year's playoff, they were over 7 twice. Into 2018, in the last five games going into the playoff, they were over 7 yards per play once. This year on offense, they were over 7.0 yards per play in 4 of the 5 games, the only exception being the Virginia game where they were at 6.9. And if you look at what they did in the first half when that game was still in doubt, they were over 7.
Right.
So and when I say it's a more explosive offense, it's personnel related as well. And it's not to say that Kevin Austin or Braden Lindsey or Lorenzo Styles are better than Miles Boykin in 2018 or Chase Claypool. That's not the point. Or better than Javon McKinley or Ben Skoranek last year. I think they are, but that's a different conversation. It's not so much about the specific receivers, who they were. It's the type of receivers that they have now. And that's the difference, is you have this group of receivers is a more dynamic group of playmakers. And what's the one thing Brian Kelly has said after both of his last 2 playoff seasons? We need more explosive playmakers.
We're not fast enough, or whatever, right. Whatever his comments
were. Not explosive enough, right? Explosive, well, you have that now. You have that now. That's part one. Part two is the running back situation is way different now than it was last year or in 2018. The reason I say it's different than it was last year, even though it was the same players, is because last year they weren't really geared towards getting Kyron the ball as much like they are now. Like, he caught like 8 passes against Bama last year. For the most part, they were all just check downs. It was just, it was captain check down.
Ooh, you went there.
I went there. I did not mean to go there. It was a bunch of checkdowns. He called like 8 checkdowns. This year he's catching balls, but it's designed throws. It's him outside. It's just a different dynamic. You've got Chris Tyree getting back and getting healthy. You can get him the ball in different ways. You're bringing Logan Diggs off the bench. You're all due respect to Sebo, love Sebo, but Logan Diggs is a more dynamic player than Sebo was as your third running back.
No question.
At receiver, Lorenzo Styles, Braden Lindsey are far more dynamic than what you had at that position last year, which was mainly Ben Skoranek. Right now, Avery Davis brought some of that, but Avery Davis was sort of an afterthought. The slot has been sort of an afterthought in this offense, right? At times it'll be good, but it's just not really what you're building your game plan around. It's that outside X position. Well, Chase Claypool, as good as he was in 2018, was not used in that type of manner in 2018. He didn't really become the big play threat he should have been in 2018 until 2019, right? When you look at Braden Lindsey, not the go-to guy, but he's a playmaker. He can do a lot of different things. You have to account for him because if you don't, he can hurt you. Kevin Austin is a guy that can do things that Miles Boykin couldn't. Not saying he's better or worse. I'm just saying he's different.
He adds a different dimension.
And that different makes him more dangerous. But to me, he's had a really sneaky good year because if you look at his numbers, so Miles Boykin in 12 games in 2018, at the end of the regular season, had 54 catches for 803 yards, right? 8 touchdowns. It's a pretty good year.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Austin at the end of the regular season this year has 42 catches, so 12 less, 783 yards. That's only, 22 yards difference? No, it's 20 yards fewer on 12 fewer catches at the end of the regular season, and he's got 6 touchdowns. And if you look at how Kevin Austin has played really since the Stanford game, I'm sorry, that's Miles Boykin's numbers. I'm looking at Kevin Austin's. Since the North Carolina game, I thought he stepped up and made some big plays in that game. They weren't sexy numbers, 3 catches for 36 yards, but he had the touchdown, a really impressive touchdown late in the first half. Since then, I think he's been a far more dynamic player. And he's been a clutch player. He's not dropping passes anymore. He's making catches. I mean, I can't remember the last time Kevin Austin dropped a pass. I think probably he had one against USC. He had a couple against USC. Remember, he dropped that early third down pass that should have set up a score, and then he dropped another go route.
Yep.
Since that USC game, he's been a much better player, and that makes him more dangerous. And we've seen 3 of the last 4 games, he's had at least one catch of over 30 yards. He had the 70-yard touchdown against Navy. He had a 38-yard catch to start the game against Georgia Tech last week. And then he had a 33-yard catch to start this past week's game. And in a 6-catch, 125-yard performance. In 2 of his last 4 games, he's had 6 catches and over 100 and at least under 25 yards. So it just makes us a more dynamic team, and I feel like the diversity of weapons is really where I'm coming from here.
Okay,
right?
That's something I want to highlight, okay? Because you use the word depth at wide receiver, and people are freaking out over here. Oh, what are you talking? There's no depth at wide receiver. Okay, depth at wide receiver means you're not afraid to throw to anybody that's on the field.
Right.
Okay,
we're not talking they're going 7 deep off the bench.
Right. There's people have to understand. Just because in the past Notre Dame had 3 receivers on the field doesn't mean they were looking at 3 different receivers. Okay, that's just a fact. Okay, but when you have the receivers that Notre Dame has, okay, Lindsey, Austin, Styles, Colsey, am I missing a 5th? That's it, right? Those are the 4 that basically play.
The receiver, yeah, Lindsey, Colsey, Styles, Austin, and
who am I missing?
Hold on. So the starters are, well, it's really just 4, right? The starters are Lindsey, Styles, and Austin, and then they're bringing Deion Colsey off the bench.
Right. Okay, so those are the 4
because Davis is hurt and Wilkins is hurt. And
right.
So, and then you've got, but the thing is, it's not just about the 4. We're not talking about the depth of just receivers.
Because then you've
the difference.
You've got Williams that can go. Kyron Williams is an amazing pass catcher. Mm-hmm. You got Chris Tyree that can catch passes, and Logan Diggs can catch passes too.
But they're also able to run the ball. Yeah, they got this guy named Michael Mayer's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily a depth that they're going 7 deep at every position. That's not the depth that we are referring to.
Right.
We are talking about the array of possibilities in the passing game, and that's what Notre Dame has not had in the past. And they haven't I should say this. They haven't exploited it in the past the way they should.
Yeah, because if the 2018 team had way more depth of just numbers, right? Because you had Boykin, you had Claypool, and you had Fink. And then you had Austin, Lindsey, Lawrence Keys, Joe Wilkins. I mean, you had a lot more players, and they were all healthy. That's not what we're talking about. They didn't use any of those guys. None of those guys played a snap against. And then they had Michael Young. They had Michael Young on that team too, who is going to be a starter in the playoff, most likely, right, for Cincinnati. It's a different type of depth that we're talking about here. We're talking about when Jack Cohn lines up, every single dude on the field right now is a legitimate weapon the teams have to account for.
Yes.
And that's the thing is, like in 2018, Dexter Williams was a great explosive runner. Nobody was afraid of Dexter Williams catching the football.
Right.
He could do one thing. Dexter was a great runner. Couldn't block, wasn't much of a pass catcher. right? And that's the difference. You could line up in 2 tight ends in this offense and go empty, and everyone's a threat. Because they don't throw to George Takis a lot, but every time George Takis has ever been targeted in the pass game, he's been effective. He's gotten open and he makes plays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here is the ball you can't just take Miles Boykin out and say, well, we took Boykin out. They got nothing. And like him or not, Jack Cohn is more willing to take shots than Ian Book was.
Correct.
Now, he's got to hit more of those shots,
right?
But he's willing to take them. And I think that's what makes this team dangerous. Obviously, the offensive line's not as good. And that's my big concern.
Oh, and we said that yesterday. I mean, that's my biggest concern going into this is Notre Dame's run blocking up front. No question about it.
And I'm concerned about the pass blocking against Michigan or Georgia. I am because those teams are
You're going to have to attempt to scheme around that. I mean, you can if you're asking your guys to go one-on-one with those guys every single play, that's probably a recipe for disaster. That's a banging your head against the wall decision.
Right.
Okay.
But
at times you're going to have to.
Then you get into the whole thing of, well, if you have to then keep your tight ends and your backs in to protect against that, then you lose some of the dynamic aspects we're talking about. But here's what I like about Tommy Rees. Early in the year, it drove me nuts they would just go this. Remember when they would go 13 personnel and put like an offensive lineman on the field and they'd do that like 10 times a game and just on normal downs and it would drive us freaking nuts. And then they'd do these plays where they'd keep Mayer and Kyron Williams in the backfield to block. Right. Tommy Rees just said, screw this.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, when was the last time we saw that with any regularity whatsoever? Yeah. You're always going to do that every now and then. That's what play action passes are for. But we're not seeing it like on 3rd and 5. On 3rd and 5, he's just like, look, we're putting everybody out in a route. Jack, it's up to you to make sure that you get rid of the ball and get where it needs to go. Right. And that's smart coaching. Stop trying to bang your head against the wall, trying to be something you're not, and realize, okay, my O-line sucks.
Yep. And give yourself
options.
options.
Do something different. And then what that's done is it's forced teams to stop blitz. If you guys notice, teams don't blitz Notre Dame as much anymore. Why?
Because they're not getting home.
They're just free, but because they're free releasing, and Jack's just getting the ball out quick.
Exactly. They're not having time to get home to Jack. What I mean by getting home is getting to the quarterback, right? They're not getting home, and so they are giving away resources to something that's not working. Right. I mean, that's basically what they're doing. And so teams have taken a step back and they're not doing that as much because, and that has also helped the offensive line. Let's be honest. The fact that Notre Dame changed their scheme, they changed their philosophy with how they are going to do things on 3rd down. It has changed what defenses are doing because when they changed, they basically said, look, you want to blitz us with 6, bring it on. Bring it on, because now you've only got 5 to cover our 5. And you know what? Our 5 are probably better than yours.
Right.
And so we're going to get open. Somebody is going to be open in that 5. And they're right. So, I really like it. And you're right. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're absolutely correct. They have limited the blitzing against Notre Dame because of what they're doing. When you have all those people in the box for Notre Dame, 2 tight ends, an H-back or whatever, you're inviting more people into the box. And then when you have more people in the box, more people are going to come get you, and you've got less people going out on routes. So it's a logical succession of thought from a football standpoint, and it makes a lot of sense.
Right. And so that's, to me, when I look at it, that's what makes me feel like they have an offense capable of going toe-to-toe with these teams. Because, look, Notre Dame is in a fortunate situation that if they get in the playoff, there isn't that juggernaut offense that we've talked about every year that you have to beat. There just isn't. Even Alabama. Yeah. I mean, if look what Auburn's front 7 did to them. Look what LSU's front 7 did to them. That's the other thing, and that's kind of, to me, perfect time, Vince, to transition and answer some super chats before we
got a bunch.
Get into that. I want to ask Searcher, do you understand now? Like, because I saw it. Do you understand what we're talking about when we use the term depth? Perhaps depth we should have clarified that beginning. I'm not talking about depth meaning they can throw 8 guys. Or like 3 great players, and 3 like Notre Dame can go 3 deep at running back right now, really 4 deep, because we saw when Audric Esime got in the game, that kid can flat out play, right? Yeah, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, like, when you look at the lineup, it's about the depth of weapons and the diversity of those weapons is what we're talking about. Did he just respond?
Yeah, he said yes.
Okay,
it's simple. Yes,
because I want to make sure that people understand what we're saying, right? Like,
absolutely.
It doesn't mean you have to agree, but if you're going to disagree or question us, I just want to make sure that that we were clear in what we were explaining.
That's why I wanted to clarify.
Right.
That's why I wanted to clarify because look, Searcher's right. If you're talking about
if we're like, oh man, if Austin goes down, they're fine. Look at the depth.
That is not.
If they lose a dude right now, they're screwed. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about.
They are in big trouble if somebody goes down at this
point.
So
what happens when half your depth chart transfers out during during an off season, and different conversation. So the Spanky 412, my man. His first question, he says, boys, we're going to play a game today. I want you guys in the chat to answer these 3 questions. 1, do you think Notre Dame can actually win the whole thing if they get in? We're going to do that one first, and then he's got another super chat here down here.
With question number 2.
2 and 3.
Oh, yes. He does ask the third one? Okay,
he does that. He asks 2. I don't know if Jason has asked number 3 yet, but we're going to go. But why should he put in number 3 and do a super chat if we haven't answered number 1 yet?
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
So, Vince, number 1, do you think Notre Dame can actually win the whole thing if they get in? I'm going to say yes because of what we just talked about offensively, but also because right now this Notre Dame defense is playing at an elite level, and I'm going to say it again. I think the best thing to happen to Notre Dame is for Kyle Hamilton to have not played the last 5 games.
Yeah.
Assuming if they get in, he comes back.
He comes back. Absolutely.
Because I'll say it again, what that means, and people hear that and they lose all thought at all and just lose their mind. What I'm saying is when you have a great player like Kyle Hamilton, and he is a phenomenal player, especially younger guys, they tend to rely on him to make the plays.
Absolutely.
And then your defensive coordinator says, okay, I'm not comfortable with this over here, so I got to use Kyle to protect. When you lose Kyle, you can't do that anymore. Everybody's exposed. And I think it really allowed Marcus Freeman to look at this defense holistically and say, how can I get these 11 going in the same direction, playing together? And you talked about this last night, Vince, when we did our Upon Further review. We kind of joke, like you and I were talking about soccer the other day, because your son plays soccer and I was making fun of soccer and all that, just because I played soccer as a kid, right? And I remember watching my sister play soccer, and it was like that magnet ball, right? Like everybody moving in the same direction, soccer. Right?
That's soccer, yeah.
But in football, I kind of use this jokingly, that's kind of what you want on defense. You want all 11 kind of working together at the same thing. And your point was that they're playing such great team defense right now.
Yeah.
That there really wasn't anybody that just stood out as there was the last few games, there hasn't been that Jerry Tillery versus Stanford performance.
Right.
Kyle Hamilton versus Florida performance. Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah versus Clemson last year performance. Jerron Jones versus Miami performance, right? We haven't seen that great. We've seen a play here, a play there. The Ademiolas had some great plays on Saturday.
Yes.
But they weren't they didn't just take over the game with 4 tackles for a lot. You know what I mean? It wasn't like this, oh my God, wow. It was just, it's 11 dudes just playing. And Ramon Henderson got hurt in the first quarter, and I didn't even notice.
I didn't either. How bad is that? I didn't even notice that either. Because they mentioned it in the post game. I was like, wait, really?
Yeah.
I agree with you.
But it's you didn't notice, because it's just okay, next man in.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can then reinsert Kyle into that while trying to maintain that, hey, just because he's back doesn't mean we're changing anything. You still got to do your job, and he's going to have to do his job. And I think it can make him better. But when you have that offense with the defense, Vince, to me, that combination is ultimately what makes me feel that they can get in. Because look, every single team that you're going to, Oklahoma State, Ohio State, or Michigan, Cincinnati. We're down to 6 teams, right? Basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's Georgia, Alabama in the SEC.
Chaos.
It's Michigan. Yeah. It's Cincinnati. It's Notre Dame, and it's Oklahoma State.
Yes, agreed.
Right? And if there is absolute chaos, it only expands to 7, in my opinion. That would be Baylor. That's it. As far as a potential that with a lot of chaos could potentially get in.
Yeah.
So, and that means Iowa beats Michigan, Houston beats Cincinnati, Georgia kills Alabama, and Notre Dame gets in, and then all of a sudden Baylor sneaks in as the 4 seed with 2 losses because they smoke Oklahoma State or something.
Yeah, that would be real
right?
interesting because they'd be jumping up from probably 8, which would be craziness.
I think they'll end up being 7 this week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they'll be ahead of Ohio State.
There's a chance for complete chaos, obviously. But yeah, that would be something
right.
else.
So the point is, there's not a lot of teams in there. But even if you include Baylor, Notre Dame matches up so much better against all these teams than they do any of the top teams from past years.
Yeah.
Like, look, does anyone look at Georgia and think, gee, they remind me of LSU in 2019?
Right, exactly.
Or Clemson in 2018. No, they don't. They're a great defensive team that is really a smart, efficient, opportunistic offense. If you turn the ball over against their defense on a 30-yard field, you might as well just say, hey, can you just go ahead and put 7 up on the board real quick? And we don't want to take that pounding, right? We don't just put 7 on the board. We're cool. We understand. And let us get back out on defense, right? Or offense. Because they're going to take advantage of that. And kudos to them for that. They play great complementary football. Their offense is a great complement to their defense, in my opinion. But they're just not that, oh, crap, it's 24-0 before you can blink type of team, right? Michigan's not that. I mean, Michigan's won a ton of grinded out games this year. Cincinnati's not like that. Oklahoma State's not like that. It's a bunch of teams that play ball very similar to Notre Dame. They just don't have the playmakers Notre Dame has. And that's the difference. Yeah. Let's say Alabama beats, let's say Georgia beats Alabama. I almost said it. Oh, let's say Georgia beats Alabama. Okay. Let's assume Michigan and Cincinnati both win. And let's assume Baylor beats Oklahoma State, right? Notre Dame's in.
Yep.
Okay.
That's I think that's the most likely path to Notre Dame getting in, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati. What of those teams scares you? Now, the one people say is, well, Georgia, and that might be the team you have to play in the first round. Okay.
That's fine. Okay.
I get it, right?
Yeah.
But if to be the best, you got to beat the best, right? And the worst case scenario for me would have been Notre Dame gets in as a 3, Cincinnati's the 4, upsets Georgia, you beat Cincinnati, and everybody diminishes your title. Well, you didn't have to play Georgia. You didn't have to be an SEC team.
Right.
Look, beat the SEC team, right? I mean, is this Georgia team any better than the 2017 Georgia team? I don't think so. And I think this Notre Dame team is better than the 2017 Notre Dame team.
Agreed.
And that 2017 Notre Dame team almost beat Georgia in the second game of the Mike Elko Chip Long era.
Right.
Right. And so I like that Notre Dame went on the road and almost beat Georgia in 2019. And that was probably the worst Notre Dame team of the last 5 years, in my opinion. Right. Would you agree with that? The 2019 was probably the worst Notre Dame team since the post 2016 makeover.
Whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Makeover. I like that.
So Notre Dame matches up with Georgia. That doesn't mean they're going to beat them. It's just football's a game of matchups. They match up better against Georgia than they do Alabama, in my opinion.
Right.
And Ohio State. I think Georgia's a way better team than those two teams. But it's about matchups, right? Why can Michigan beat Ohio State but get beat by Michigan State? The matchups are different, right? Michigan's not a great passing team. They're not a great run defense team. It's a bad mixture. Ohio State's got a pretty good run defense. They didn't look like that against Michigan, and they can throw the heck out of the ball. Michigan can't stop. I mean, again, I will remind y'all, Aiden O'Connell threw for over 550 yards against Michigan State. Okay. My bowl projections article at irishbreakdown.com, all the new bowl projections almost all of them are Michigan State against Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. Jack Cohn is going to end his Notre Dame career with a monster freaking game.
Yeah, no kidding.
If that's who Notre Dame is playing in the bowl game. So in the Fiesta Bowl. But that's my thing, Jason, is I think they can get in because, number one, I think they have a dynamic, explosive offense. We haven't talked a ton about the defense because I feel like we've already established that we think this defense is great. What do you need to be a championship defense? To me, it comes down to 3 ingredients that I think Notre Dame has them all. Number one, you need speed. Notre Dame isn't an elite speed team, but they got a lot of speed, right? Now, not everywhere. I got, corner, opposite Cam Hart. I don't love that matchup. But if you have Kyle Hamilton, you can kind of negate it. With the lineup they're playing at safety now, when Ramon's healthy, they've got a lot more speed than they did a month ago at safety. I think they run pretty well at linebacker. And, of course, the second ingredient is you need an elite defensive line. And Notre Dame has an elite defensive line. There's no question about it. And then the third ingredient is you got to be able to force turnovers.
Right.
And this team has been really, really good at forcing turnovers. And they've been that way all season. And so to me, I mean, look, Notre Dame in 12 games this year has forced at least 2 turnovers in 8 of those 12 games. They forced 23 turnovers this year. It's an average of almost 2 a game. They didn't force any against Toledo, or they only forced 1 against Toledo, 1 against Cincinnati, 1 against North Carolina, and none against Navy. Well, against Navy, they didn't need to force turnovers because they just were 3 and out all freaking day. Navy didn't run enough plays to turn the ball
right,
over.
and they're just running the ball, and it's just not a lot of opportunity.
Right. So, and then when you look at the one turnover they didn't have against Cincinnati, was a huge turnover because they strip sack the quarterback. Drew White picks it up, runs it back a bunch of yards, and it sets up a Notre Dame touchdown. That sparked the whole thing. So that's the other thing is their turnovers have been very opportunistic in that they've either resulted in points because Notre Dame has scored 4 defensive touchdowns this year, or they've set the offense up for quick points. I think those are the 3 key ingredients to a great championship defense that you have to have. I think if you were going to question one of them, the speed would be the one that I would question, right? That would be the one to say they've got some speed, but that's depending on the matchup. That's why I was concerned about Ohio State. But again, none of the teams they would be facing in the postseason have the kind of speed on offense that really amplifies that concern. Okay. So that would be my thoughts, Vince. Do you have anything else to add to that part of the question for Jason?
Definitely don't have anything to add. I think that they can win. Yes, I feel much better about this playoff and Notre Dame's chances than I have the whole time, any other time Notre Dame has gotten in. So, yes, I do feel like they could win.
Okay. Spanky's next question. If you answered yes to 1, 2, okay, how much money would you be willing to pay to get them in, and how much money would it take for you to receive to soften the blow if they don't get in? I have no idea.
I don't even know how to answer that one, to be perfectly honest with you, man.
Jason, you've known me long enough, man. You know I don't think in terms like that.
I'm not paying anything for Notre Dame to get in because I think they'll get in on their own merit.
Yes.
I'll save the money.
But if I had to pay,
snacks.
Look, whatever it takes, man, just get in. Just get in. Because I think I'll make that money up once they get there. Spanky, final question. And 3, saying all that, who's with me in hammering Michigan, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati money line parlay this weekend? If you lose, Indy gets in the playoff. If it wins, we're out, but you win a lot of money. But it's a good way of looking at it, right? Like if all those teams win, you're sad because none of them make the playoffs, but you're sad all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
Right? But if you lose,
he's not wrong.
Yeah, but if you lose, you're happy because that means Notre Dame's the happiest you'd ever be losing money. So that's a good way of looking at it, Jason.
Yeah,
it's a good way of looking at it. We had some other super chats I want to get to. Oh, Jason. Kill me, my man. All right. William Wolf says, dream scenario, beat Georgia in the playoff first game and then demolish Cincinnati to win the national title. Go Irish. Yes.
That's the one you don't want, though.
No. The dream scenario for me, or the worst case scenario for me is Cincinnati beats Georgia in the first round. You beat Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And then you beat Cincinnati for the title.
I got you. And so you don't have that SEC win on your resume.
Now, it won't matter to me. If Brian Kelly wins a title this year, I don't care if he beats Cincinnati and Michigan to get there.
I'll help him pick out the spot for his statue.
You know what I mean? Good. Because, look, you those teams earn those spots. Well, you didn't beat Ohio State. Yeah, we beat the team that kicked the crap out of Ohio State.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't beat Georgia. Yeah, we beat the team that beat Georgia, right? I mean, so I won't care about that. But from a perception standpoint is all I care about. I don't care how Brian Kelly gets a title if he gets it. Doesn't matter to me.
No, I'm with you.
You won't hear me saying that crap because, look, you handled your business and they didn't. I mean,
it'll be a celebration. It'll be a celebration 100%. Podcast for us.
100%. Now, what I was saying, so that's what I was saying. I think he's correct. You beat Georgia in the first round and you get Cincinnati in a rematch. Because the thing is, I would actually feel like Notre Dame will be more up for that game than they would the Michigan game, simply because it's payback time.
Yeah.
And because the danger is always whenever you beat the big dog in the semifinal, okay, are you going to still be locked in the championship game? I would imagine so, but there's always that danger. Cincinnati, there'd be no overlooking Cincinnati, in my opinion. Not at that point in time. Brian Kelly would. He didn't have him ready to play the first time. Could you imagine if Brian Kelly lost the national championship game to Cincinnati?
Ooh,
it's not happening. I'm telling you right now, it's not happening.
It's not happening.
It's not happening. But yeah, William, I think that would be a pretty dream scenario in my opinion. Got a super chat from Matt Romero. Vince, here's a good one. Hey, guys, in your preseason interview with Coach Reese, he said he wants his offense to be both aggressive and efficient. How would you say he's done achieving that? Thanks. Vince, start off with that because I think that's a great question.
I think it is a really great question. And I would say the beginning of the season, I would say he needs to go back in the lab and figure some things out. But that's what they did during the bye week. And I feel like now
You're being kind.
I know. I would say
I would have said he flat out lied.
Yeah.
Based on the first half of the season, it was a flat out lie. He told us what we wanted to hear.
But
that's what I would have said.
But I will say in the second half, this is exactly what they are.
Yes.
They are aggressive and efficient. All you have to do is look at Jack Cohn's numbers for efficiency and, downfield passes and, all of the things that we've talked about equals aggressive and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say second half, he's right on the money. And I would wonder, since he did say that in the preseason and we've seen it in the second half, if it took him half a year to convince his boss to allow him to be that way.
There you go. Yep.
That's what I'll say.
There you go. No, I think that's spot on, Vince. I got nothing. Yeah. You've left me semi-speechless.
That doesn't happen often.
I'm still talking because I never stop talking, but I have no rebuttal. I have nothing to build onto that. That was a phenomenal answer, Vince. That was
thank you.
That was one of your
best. A really good question, Matt.
That was a great question. Because that's kind of getting back to what we talked about at the beginning. So this is I found my thing to say, Vince. I'm not entirely speechless. It goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, right? And that is look at Notre Dame's yards per play in the last 5 games. 7-7, 7-1, 6-9, 8-7, 7-2. Notre Dame's all-time record for yards per play in a season is 7.0. And that was in 2015. Now, the first 6 games, it wasn't that great. 6-2, 6-0, 5-2, 3-5, 4-6, 5-8, 5-4. Then the bye week, the 5-4 was against USC. That was kind of they were adjusting to the new thing. They had some drops in that game that would have led to it even being better. But you're seeing that big play. You don't average 7 yards of play for 5 straight games, basically, if you're not explosive.
Yeah.
But you also don't do that if you're not necessarily efficient. And when you look at Jack Cohn, really since the North Carolina game, his last 5 games, here's his yards per attempt: 8-8, 9-3, 7-6, 11-6, 9-5. That's exceptional. And you look at his completion percentage, 69.2, really since the USC game, 73.3, 69.2, 80, 78.3, 69.2, 75. His worst completion percentage in the last 6 since the bye week is 73 or 69.2. If you look at what he was before the season, and again, the Florida State game is what drove us so nuts, because when you watch the Florida State game and then you watch the next 4 games, it's like, where'd that go?
Because we were all on board after the Florida State game. We're like, here we go.
Quick game, aggressive, and then it's 66.7, then 46.9, 56.8, 50, and then Jack Cohn let me actually pull this up. I was looking at the total passing. Jack was 74.3, then it was 63.6, 48.4, 51.7, 63.6. And then so in the last 6 games, he's been 71.4, 66.7, 79.3, 75, 75, 74.3. His lowest performance was 66.7. That would have been his second best performance of the first 5 games. His worst performance would have been his best. He's been over 70% this year 7 times. Mm-hmm. Right?
And it's been 5 of the last 5 of those 7.
It'd be 5 of the last 6. Well, actually 6 of the last 7 because he went 75% against Virginia Tech, but only threw 12 passes because he got yanked.
Yeah.
But I mean, his in yards per attempt, 8.9, 9.3, 6.6, 14.3, and 9.9. I mean, that's a combination of explosive and efficiency that Tommy Rees talked about. And, I'm all for it. That's just a great question. Great question.
I love that question, actually.
Yeah.
All right. We got some more, I assume.
We do. Yep, we do. I'm trying to go down here. Matthew Milner, skip my classes to fly out early for the 55-0 blowout of Tech. Hot takes that I want you to discuss. Michigan is the scariest team for Notre Dame in the top 10. A bowl win is better than a playoff loss. So let's take the first one, Vince. Hot takes he wants us to just, first of all, skipped classes to fly out early to the bowl game.
To the blowout of Tech.
Yes.
That's
Love it.
So worth it.
I mean, people are not going to like me to say that, but you know what?
Yeah.
When I was in high school and college, my teachers told me I was wasting my time by doing stats and drawing up rankings and stuff in the back of the classroom. Ha ha, you were wrong. So if you find what you're passionate about, man, do what you got to do.
I'm literally sitting in a house of learning.
Vince, you're not allowed to say nothing, okay? Let me speak for you. You just move on to the question. Michigan is the scariest team for Notre Dame in the top 10.
I still think Georgia's scarier. I think their defense is better than Michigan's defense. I haven't dove real deep into Michigan or Georgia because Notre Dame didn't play them this year. But from the periphery, from what I've seen, I am more scared of Georgia's defense. And I would say if I was comparing the two, I'm more afraid of Georgia's offense. Now, that's not saying a whole lot, but overall, Georgia is the team that I still think is the scariest.
Agree with that. I think both of them are somewhat vulnerable to the pass.
Yeah.
But Michigan much more so than Georgia.
Yeah.
Much more so than Georgia. So, yeah, Georgia's still the tougher. Now, Michigan, of all the potential playoff teams, Michigan to me is the second toughest, no question. I mean, look, I hate to say it. I never hate to say it because I'm always going to speak the truth. I just don't like saying it. Yeah. It's probably a better way to say it. But Michigan's Harbaugh's done a phenomenal job this year. I kept waiting for them to fall off
and get back to. I kept waiting for them to fall off in the Ohio State game.
Right.
And every time Ohio State looked like they were going to take control of that game, Michigan answered.
Physically.
I mean, I was impressed by that.
Oh, and by the way, do you know how many career starts the starting offensive line for Michigan had coming into the season?
Oh, maybe.
23.
Okay. And how many did Notre Dame have coming in?
63.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. So, second part of that, a bowl win is better than a playoff loss.
Disagree.
I'm gonna agree from the standpoint of perception-wise, sure, but that Notre Dame doesn't need a Fiesta Bowl win over Michigan State to advance as a program. That's more of a fan thing.
Yeah.
Hey, we got the big bowl game thing monkey off our back. Okay, fine, but you don't learn where you are as a program by playing Michigan State. You evaluate where you are as a program by playing Georgia, by playing Ohio State, by playing Alabama. That's how you find out where you are. You go and beat a Michigan State team that just has no business being on the field with you. Mel Tucker did a phenomenal job with that team this year. They are not as good. Look, what's the one thing you can say about Michigan State all year? In every game they played, they had the best running back on the field. Not against Notre Dame.
No way.
Nope. So I mean, I don't really view that as a situation where you really learn a lot about yourself. Perception-wise, fan feeling-wise, yeah, you'll feel better after that. So for you, Matt, you'll probably feel better. A lot of fans will feel better. Honestly, in my super, like my outward layers, I would much rather talk about Notre Dame beating Michigan State than losing again to Georgia by 20.
Sure.
Not going to lie.
I get that. But I get that.
From an analyst standpoint, so that's me. That's my fan take. That's Brian grew up a Notre Dame fan take.
Yep.
As a coach who looks at it from a standpoint of what's getting you closer to winning a title, it's evaluating yourself against them. Because if they go out and beat Michigan State, who's not good, does Brian Kelly really get a sense of where's my program truly in regards to competing for titles? No, because then your best win this season is over Michigan State, who would be 10-3. And then you'd have a couple wins over 8-4 teams. Did you really get tested? Okay, well, you played one playoff team and you lost by 11 at home, right? So do you really get tested? Do you really get does Brian Kelly really get shown where his team is? I don't think that it does.
Well, and look, for me as a coach, if I'm a Notre Dame coach and I'm trying to recruit kids, I would much rather say we've been in the college football playoff 3 of the last 4 years than we just beat the third best Big Ten team in the Fiesta Bowl. Like that.
Right.
I'm sorry, that doesn't carry as much gravitas for me.
Right.
You know, and I don't think it carries it on the recruiting trail. So I'm going to want to make the playoff every time.
Yeah. Spanky comes back. He's on fire today, Vince.
Yeah.
I don't care if the SOB, he's referring to Kelly, beats Holy Cross for the title. Just get me my title. And after a week of sticking it to everyone and buying all my haters champion shirts, God can take me after that. So I hope he does it because you're my man, Jason. Love you, man. I don't want God to take anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, that's my thing. In today's era, there's no such thing as a cheap championship, in my opinion. Now, ESPN will spin it. You know they will. If you don't beat an SEC team, it doesn't count, right? Let's be real about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've kind of proven over the last couple of years, I don't give a crap what ESPN thinks. If Brian Kelly goes out and wins a title and Georgia can't beat Cincinnati or can't beat Michigan or whoever else, that's Georgia's problem. Okay? You could make a case opposite, like back in the day when it was pollsters. Because Notre Dame never got to face this team or that team or whatever. You could maybe or any team. Nowadays in the playoff era, nope. You win it. You've earned it because you got to win. You got to win twice. Kevin Carter with a super chat, not wanting to focus on the negative, but if they don't get in, being they are so close, do you think it would be the last domino for Kelly to make changes at O-line and receiving coaching? That's my problem. I think that would be the worst case scenario. Because they're going to go in and beat some Michigan State or Pitt or Wake Forest, and Kelly's going to be able to look and do exactly what he did in 2015. We're so close. We just got to coach a little better and play a little harder. Brian Kelly has not been someone that has been prone to making big changes from a negative standpoint unless he gets embarrassed.
Yep.
Now, you say, well, he went out and hired Freeman. That's because Clark Lee left. He didn't fire Clark Lee, nor should he have, but he didn't fire Clark Lee. He had to go out and get Freeman because he just lost a great defensive coordinator who got a head coaching job.
He wouldn't have done it because, look, you're not going to fire Clark Lee. He was doing a great job. I mean,
that's what I'm saying is that hire's not the same thing as firing a coach who's failing.
Right. He
didn't fire Brian Van Gorder until there was a mutiny, and it was clear that it was a failure, right? He didn't make major staff changes in 2016 until it was just you may lose your job. Since then, name me a major decisions he's made before it was too late, right? Or before a guy left. Autry Denson, he kept around way too long. You look at Harry Hiestand. He didn't fire Harry Hiestand, nor should he have. What I'm saying is that's not a move he made because he got rid of somebody. They've all been moves because people have left.
Right. Exactly.
And so he has not shown, barring just a total disaster. Like, what changes did he make after 2018? Right? What changes did he make after Bama smacked his team last year? None. Right? The only changes were people leaving. Clark Lee left. You could argue, maybe Terry Joseph was shown the door, maybe. No real evidence of that. But that's about it. But no major changes. It's going to take them getting to the postseason and failing for him to do that. Or here's the other counter to that, right? If we're being honest and fair, if Notre Dame goes into the postseason and the offensive line plays well against Georgia and the offensive line plays well in the championship game, you shouldn't fire Jeff Quinn.
Right, because he's done a great job of getting them back to where they should be.
Right.
I mean, it again, that hurt that.
No, it didn't hurt me because I like Jeff Quinn.
I like him
as a person. If Jeff Quinn, look, Vince, if Jeff Quinn gets his head out of his behind and realizes, you know what, we were doing things differently in 2020 because of Harry and because of Jeff, because of Chris Watt. I need to get back to that. Good, because I like him.
Right.
There's some coaches I enjoyed hammering Brian Van Gorder because he was not a nice person. I did not like him. And it was never personal in my complaints, but I got personal satisfaction over my legitimate analysis because I didn't like him. With Jeff Quinn, I don't enjoy banging on Jeff Quinn. I don't enjoy banging on Del Alexander because, Vince, you've met him. You've had interactions with him. You've seen him at his kids' basketball games. He's a dad. He's a good dude. I mean, everybody likes him. It's just not getting the job done.
Right.
Jeff Quinn's not getting the job done. But if Jeff Quinn rallies and says, hey, I got to make changes and this, that, and the other, and he gets it done, okay, great. That's wonderful. But the point is he's got to get it done. It can't just be you kind of won in spite of that. That's the difference. All right. We got, I think, Vince, that is the last of our super chats. Let me just check here real quick. And then that's going to do it for today's show. But man, great audience interaction today. Even the stuff that we didn't necessarily pull up. A lot of great conversation going on. Yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. Vince, I do believe that is it for the super chat. So
cool.
Rest of the week, some of the topics we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Notre Dame players and who may or may not leave, who should or should not leave. We're going to do a show on that this week. We're going to do a preview of this weekend's games. So we'll look at the matchups of the games, but we're also going to talk about who Notre Dame needs to lose. What result does Notre Dame need in those games? We'll go through all those scenarios. We'll do that later in the week. We're also going to do a show that's sort of in response to a lot of comments being made on Fox and ESPN about, is this as far as Notre Dame can go? Is this it? Is this the pinnacle? This almost but not quite good enough that people talk about? Is this the best that Brian Kelly can do at Notre Dame? And is this the best Notre Dame can do? The comments being, Brian Kelly's taken Notre Dame as far as he can, or as far as it can go. And we're going to have a show on that, because I have some very strong opinions on that subject. Then, of course, tomorrow night we will have a show. I did look it up, Vince. The show is at 7 p.m. So we'll get started around 7:20 to 7:30. The show will start around then, where we will break down the college football playoff rankings. And, of course, we will have a mailbag this week. Maybe Friday. We may move it to another day. We haven't quite decided that yet. We may do – and I would love some feedback on this, because we'll see your chats even when we're done. Would you rather do the mailbag on Thursday and then the previews on Friday, or other way around? So this is something we're curious to hear from you all about. So, but that's kind of our schedule for the week, and we're going to get after it. So we appreciate everybody being part of what we got going on here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, sign up for the message boards down below. Okay. Check out the Built Bar, 10% off, best protein bars in the business. If you like candy bars, get a Built Bar, because they're way healthier, way better, and you can actually have them and not feel guilty. Okay. I have legitimately not bought a candy bar since I started eating Built Bars. And Vince, I like candy bars. I did not get this figure by turning down candy bars. Okay. All right. So check that out. Use the promo code Irish Breakdown. You get 10% off your whole order. For Vince, right? I got this kind of down now, Vince.
See?
Vince,
exactly.
I'm Brian. And you all are a big reason why this channel has really taken off. So thank you so much. So have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.